Are you waiting for the foreclosure boom before you buy a house? Hold that thought. In this video, let's dive into exactly what to expect around foreclosures going forward so that you can make the best decision for yourself. Hi, I'm Allesen Cann. I'm a real estate agent here in beautiful San Diego, California. I'm very passionate about making sure that people really understand what's going on in the market so that they can make the best decisions for themselves, not just looking at the scary headlines. So don't forget to subscribe and let's dive into this topic. First, let's review some history. So in the run-up to 2008, there were a lot of things going on that led to that whole debacle. One of those things was people were getting mortgages who shouldn't have been getting mortgages. Literally, all you had to do was prove that you were alive to get a mortgage. And unfortunately, the mortgages that people were getting were often interest only and adjustable rate mortgages, because the assumption was prices would keep going up, they would refinance, they would get a better mortgage later, and everything would be hunky-dory. The problem is that's not what happened. So people were getting these adjustable rate mortgages that would only last for like a year or two before the rate would go way higher, and or they would also have this balloon payment that they would have to do when the rate changed. It led to a lot of issues. Prices were also going up at this time, and that didn't even make sense because there were a ton of houses on the market, and supply and demand says that the more supply, the lower prices should be. And there was a ton of supply, yet prices were going up. They should have been going down. Once people finally figured this out, prices started to go down, but people had these adjustable rate mortgages, and now they couldn't refinance. They didn't have any equity in their homes because they had put 0% down, and now the value of their home was below what they paid for it. So they had these adjustable rate mortgages. They could no longer afford the payment when the rate adjusted, and or they couldn't afford the balloon payment, and they couldn't get out of it, and then they just couldn't pay anything. And then a bunch of people also lost their jobs on top of that, and you put all of that together, and we had a mass of foreclosures. And of course, as all this happened, then that meant that people didn't want to buy houses, so demand dried up, prices went down even further, and they just kept going down, and everything went insane around the country. And these people couldn't sell their houses either because A, there was no demand, but B, they would also owe a ton of money to the bank because now their house was worth less than they paid for it. They didn't have any equity because they put 0% down. So they would either have to do a short sale or they got foreclosed on if they couldn't make those payments, or they were stuck in their house, which a lot of people were. A lot of people just stayed and rode it out for the next 10 plus years until prices finally recovered. But if they couldn't afford that payment and they couldn't sell, that's when they ended up getting foreclosed on. But during that time, a lot of multimillionaires got created because those who could see what was going on went and snatched up the real estate that was now really inexpensive. And that's what's leading people today to think, oh, I'll just wait for the foreclosures. The market's crazy just like it was before, right? So it's gonna happen and then I'll make a ton of money. This is not 2008. In 2008, there were a ton of houses on the market. It didn't make sense. Prices were going up, even though there was lots of supply. It was all crazy because it was just a speculation bubble. Today, prices are going up a lot, but it's because there aren't enough houses to meet demand. So the lack of supply is creating higher prices, which is the basic law of supply and demand. And we've been seeing this get worse every year for the past 5 years with no real end in sight. Add to that it's a lot harder to get a mortgage today. So those people who have mortgages can actually afford their mortgages. And add to that, 40% of homes in America are owned outright. Like they don't owe any money on them. And of that remaining part, those who actually have a mortgage still in their home, 60% of those have a mortgage that's less than 4% interest rate. They've got really good mortgages that like really low payments. As I'm filming this, we're around 6.5%. So they're way below what we have now. And as most people know, we actually topped out at 8% earlier this year. And those mortgages at 4% or less are fixed rate mortgages. Their payments are not changing. So I've heard people say like, well, you know, I'm just gonna wait because now they can't afford their payments. Their payments don't change. They don't have adjustable rate mortgages. They have fixed rate mortgages at 3% interest rate. They can afford it. It's not a big deal. and they have a ton of equity because prices have gone up so much in the past few years. The average homeowner has at least $275,000 in equity. So if they lose their job and they can't make their payments, they're just gonna sell the house. They're not gonna get foreclosed on because they've got a ton of equity. They'll just sell the house and move on with their lives. Basically, there's really no reason for foreclosures to skyrocket like they did in 2008. Now, you might see headlines saying really scary things like foreclosure rates soar or foreclosures up 30%. Well, let's put that in perspective. In 2008 or when after that, the foreclosures actually hit their peak, it was 2.23% of all homes got foreclosed on. It was a big number. But let's compare that to today. Even with that 30% increase that we've seen this year, we are at 0.23% of homes. So even if that doubles, we're still really low and it's not going to be a big thing. So yes, you're seeing the headlines. No, they don't mean what you think they mean, because 30% increase, a doubling of whatever from this low of a rate doesn't really give you much. On top of that, here is what I firmly believe. Even if, say, something crazy happened and we did have a ton of foreclosures come on the market, again, I have no idea what would cause that. But if it did, there are a ton of people waiting for that to happen. And there's so much pent-up demand for people who want to buy houses and want to buy cheap houses that they would actually drive the prices of those houses up. And there would probably be bidding wars on them and they would all get snatched up. And they wouldn't actually be deals. They would sell for market value, just like every other house on the market. So basically, even if that happened, it wouldn't actually happen because it can't happen because there's too much demand to allow it to happen. Does that make sense? So if you have been waiting for foreclosures to come before you buy a house, I don't think that's the best strategy. As Barbara Corcoran says, the best time to get in the market is now, or at least when you are ready. Don't worry about what's going on. If you're going to be in the market long term, it's always a good bet. Real estate almost always goes up. At least in the long term, it always goes up. So stop worrying about the headlines. Stop trying to find a way around the prices. Just get in the market. Okay, I hope all that made sense. If it doesn't, if you have any questions, if I missed anything, please comment below and let me know. Don't forget to give this a thumbs up if it was at all helpful, and click the little bell and subscribe so you get notified when I put out new content.